absolutely.
Afraid of them. But Paul, I guess it all comes down to the way we handle mistakes. So what's
Hmm.
the best way to handle mistakes in your classroom? So how would you approach that?
It's a really interesting question, and this is like something that like could be presented on like all day. It's a huge thing. What's interesting is we know the theory of error correction. Whether you're doing for accuracy, fluency, but I actually find those ideas basic. They're important, but quite basic. I think for me, what's really important when I teach is that the first ingredient I need for myself as a teacher is empathy. The reason I need that is because I need to see exactly how each individual student is feeling that particular lesson or day and how I respond to them. Because if that particular student, let's just say, is rather introverted, constantly on edge, uneasy, I will perhaps maybe correct a bit less and allow more fluency, just to allow them to have the confidence of providing some language and ignoring it. Where if there is another student who maybe is confident, who maybe is expecting more kind of correction, then perhaps I will. And so it really, really depends on what is going on at that time among my students, because it's a very, very touchy subject. As we just said, in Russia, there are many people with imposter syndrome. If, like, when many Russian students do ask all the time, correct me, I want all of my mistakes corrected, it's like, you won't come back if I do. Like, you'd be a wreck if I corrected everything. And also, it would completely destroy the dynamics of the class. So I'm going to focus on particular points to correct, especially the language that we're practicing, and other stuff I might just ignore. And also identifying what's a slip versus a mistake, or something kind of a critical mistake. What
Yeah,
about you?
so agree, so much agree. What I would start correcting from is asking why you correct, because your why is going to determine your how. And for example,
Yes.
you kind of correct everything. Why should you do that? What are you going to do with my correction? I mean, I
Hmm.
we should correct it the way that a person says, okay, this could be done better, this could be done
Hmm.
better this way, and they just
Hmm.
take your advice and go and improve. And it's
Hmm.
impossible to like improve everything. It's
Absolutely.
about our previous point. Mistakes can help you make progress. So we should
Hmm.
correct in such a way that our corrections will help them make progress, right? It's
Absolutely.
and talking psychologically, I totally agree with you. But empathy is like the key, and it's I mean the underlying approach of how it should
Mhm.
work. I would also add kind of appreciate your students, value them, respect them, and make them feel that they're valued and appreciated. And this does
Yes, yes. That's absolutely, that's extremely important, and I agree with you 100%. And that actually comes under the realm of charisma, because that actually is about taking attention away from you and putting it onto them by giving them value, making them appreciate it, that we listen to them and that we support them, and in return that we actually see magnetic. That's charisma. That's the charismatic teacher.
Absolutely. That's so true, because your correction can be super judicious, but if
Hmm.
correction doesn't kind of hit the fertile soil of your students, so to speak, it will be just, I mean, just in vain, right? So they should be ready to accept this, right? It's
Yes.
and another thing, I guess, when it comes to some technical details, I believe that, of course, we should prioritize and choose what particular points could help students
Yes.
make the best possible progress under their circumstances, right? And then I guess correction should be done in kind of impersonalized form. So you're not,
Yes.
Masha, don't forget about as in present simple. But
Hmm.
it's what I do, I write this kind of mistaken sentence in a document or on a blackboard if you're teaching offline, and like say, guys, let's have a look at this one. How can we fix that? And they
Hmm.
can produce this active correction because this is how they retrieve this from their mind.
That's amazing. I'm so happy to hear that, Natasha, because that's what I used to do very often when I was like having my classes teaching face to face. I'd actually sometimes get like a mistakes written down during the lesson because there's only so much time in the lesson to get stuff done, and I'd actually write down the mistakes that were made as a kind of conundrum,
Mhm.
and say for homework, solve these mistakes, and they would actually come back and have a sort of conscious appreciation of what's right, and it really, really worked. But that comes down to the teacher providing a very strong lesson plan and actually being responsible, because again, it requires some work, but it has to be done. What I tend to do when I correct, especially if it's face to face, it's harder online because you don't have that teacher's presence as much as face to face. I like to gesture, or like if I'm kind of listening to a student, I lean forward, so I'm kind of in their zone and I'm listening, and I'm kind of like click when I hear something or use a face expression like that, so they see it and self correct. So I'm using a lot of verbal cue, or sorry, a lot of cues to kind of signify that that's not quite. And then they sit and go, I've done something wrong. I'll correct it without me having to interrupt them all the time. Because again, the dynamics of speech for fluency I think is really, 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 really important.
Absolutely, absolutely. And what I love about this approach, Paul, is that it also instills this self-correction skill.
Mm-hmm.
We can't be constantly spoon-feeding them, can we?
Yes.
To equip them with the tools to be able to self-correct, and this is just a splendid way to do this, I guess.
Exactly, exactly. And one of the things is that when we teach our students and when we kind of practice like a grammar point, most of the time the students know the grammar. Like we've explained it, they've got a good, strong awareness of what we've been teaching them. Most of the mistakes often occur as slips when we do kind of reinforced practice. So that's why I don't feel the need to kind of just shout out like it is not are, to kind of affect that dynamic. So that's why I prefer to gesture, because like, well, I have a feeling they know it. They just need to be pointed out. Self-correction enough, unless it's like a student who was doing something maybe relatively new that they've read somewhere else that's completely wrong or didn't make sense. Then I might have to kind of interrupt and say, let's change that around a bit, or something.
That's true, absolutely true. And this is, I guess, very much along the lines with Stephen Krashen's theory of kind of monitor, when you have to be able to kind of consciously correct yourself. And when you prove them into doing this by showing some gestures, this is how you kind of nurture this mechanism in them. That's just great.
Yeah.
And by the way,